How's it going, everyone? Hope you're doing well. Welcome to this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. It's been over a month since we last spoke, and I'm going to blame the weather on that one. While we had a hurricane come through here, luckily not a lot of damage here, no flooding like 2 years ago, so we're very thankful for that. We were without power for a few days, and then after that, we didn't get internet back for a few more days after that. So this episode's actually been about a week or two late in the making. Having Blake back on to discuss the disaster that has been the UCF football season so far. So I'm going to pull him in a minute. Just wanted to give a quick explanation why it took so long for another episode. I had other things planned between now and the middle of the football season, but Mother Nature had other plans. So just a quick explanation. Hope everyone is safe from the hurricane if you're listening from Florida, and hope everything's going good wherever you might be listening. So just wanted a quick explanation for everybody there. About to bring Blake back in, and we are going to talk about where does UCF go from here 7 games into the 2024 season. So again, thanks for tuning in, and here we go. All right, here we are 1 month and 7 games later. Blake is nice enough to join me again. Good to see you as always, my friend. I'm going to start it off just like this. Is this the worst timeline of how this season could have gone through 7 games? Because we were so full of hope when the year started, and now here we are.
Good to see you and chat with you again. And I admit that I wish it was under better circumstances for our season, because it definitely, if you had asked me a month and a half ago that we'd be 3-4 at this point, I'd be like, oh no. But maybe 4-3, but not 3-4.
Sure.
Obviously, I think the expectations were much higher for what we have going on right now. But I'm going to be cautiously optimistic for the last 5 games of the season.
Yeah, so I mentioned in the intro, I think our original plan, win, lose, or draw, we were going to do this after the Florida game.
Yep.
And we kind of started to plan that, but we were preparing for the both of us were preparing for the hurricane. Luckily, no flooding here, no damage with you, and that's really the most important thing. And then we would have done it probably after the Cincinnati game, but while I had power back, I didn't have internet back. So I just got internet back, I think, late Sunday night. So this is really the earliest we could get together to do it. So nobody was ducking anything. Yes, those losses sucked, but this is about as early as we could get it. Just so I've got some tweets like, "Hey, you haven't put a video out in a month," and I'm like, "It's not from lack of trying." So I just wanted to get that out there. We weren't hiding from anything. This is just when we could get this done.
Absolutely.
So I think the easiest way to get this going. So we had a lot of positive things to say in the preseason. Some, believe it or not, are still true, and then there's plenty that aren't. So we're just going to do a classic round of where we were right, where we were wrong here, and I have the list, and I'm going to kind of run it down, and you can give your opinions of it. Let's start with the positives. Where we were right, RJ Harvey, every bit as good as advertised, as well as Penny Boone, with the little added flavor of Miles Montgomery outside of his injury time, and even Johnny Richardson, besides a fumble here or two. Running back room, maybe one of the deepest in college football, which is something that we called off the bat. So, again, aside from a fumble here or there, the running back room, I could not ask more from them this year so far.
Absolutely. I admit that I'm not sure where we stand exactly this week, but I know 1 or 2 weeks ago we were still ranked like the 4th top rushing offense in the country or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we were still at least top 10. So I'd like to believe that we were absolutely right about the running back room, obviously led by RJ Harvey. And then Penny Boone has been a very good complementary piece that has a really good chance to become the guy next year. Hopefully he stays on our roster. But yeah, I would agree that I believe that we were right about the running back room being absolutely one of the best. And I think statistically we're still in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and RJ Harvey himself, as we record this on a Wednesday night, happy NBA tip-off day for those who celebrate, by the way, too, as we record this. He's 5th in the country with somewhere over 800 rushing yards. We originally we got a little bold and said we would have 2,000-yard rushers. I would like to amend that only slightly. I think the RJ Harvey 1,000-yard is all but confirmed, barring any negative things. But I think it's still possible that RJ Harvey can be a 1,000-yard rusher, and the remaining backs collectively could make another 1,000 yards. I think that is something that could still be on the table, maybe.
Oh, I agree. And then I forgot off the top of my head how many yards Penny Boone has, but I want to say that he probably is on pace for somewhere between 400 and 500, and then Miles Montgomery might add a couple hundred there, and then the other couple between the the quarterback rushing yards as well. We're probably going to have north of 2,000 rushing yards, which there's a lot of teams in the country that won't be able to do that at all. So,
So as it stands right now, as a team, they have 1,962 rushing yards, 890 of that being RJ Harvey. So when you factor in the quarterbacks, we will definitely have 1,000-yard RJ Harvey and 1,000-yard rest of the team. So that I think we got a little bold with the two individuals, basically saying Penny and RJ would do it, but we weren't totally off track. I'm gonna call that one a win.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and that's phenomenal. I mean, again, like statistically, there's probably less than like 12 or 15 teams in the country that get more than 2,000 rushing yards in a season, much less 25, 27, 2,800 yards, whatever we end up at the end of the season with. So,
And that's 19 rushing touchdowns, so that's 19 on the ground as well. That's quite that's over across looks like about 10 different people that have carried the ball so far this year. I put it in the positive. This is more of a neutral one, but like I do feel the linebacker play has improved compared at least to last year. The defense has looked good and bad depending on the game we're talking about. But like when Barr is healthy, you can tell the difference because he's missed a game, I believe. But I'm going to give that one a win as well. I think when the defense is playing well, the linebackers, and I think a lot of that is Deshaun Pace turning into an outside linebacker. When we did the preview, we were still talking about him as a defensive back. So between making interceptions in the pass game, just breaking up passes and actual, tackles and such, I think the linebacker core is very much improved for better or worse with the rest of the defense.
oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sure statistically speaking, we're a much better rushing defense than we were this time last year. It shows. Obviously, there's been times where they've given up big plays, but just like any other defense, it's going to happen. But it is just visibly, as someone who's watched every single game this year and every single game last year, visibly we are a much better linebacker performing team, and also just with the rushing defense as well. I think it's visibly much more improved than last year.
And then this is kind of where we were right end, but I am pretty happy with this one outside of a drop or two. With Let me make sure I have the numbers here correct. Give me 1 second. Where is he at? Oh, okay, here it is. Sorry. So Randy Pittman from the tight end position has definitely comparing it to last year, which is what we were doing. Alec Holler, much different tight end than what Randy Pittman is. And outside of a drop or two, definitely a more vertical threat down the field. While the offense has sputtered overall, that's not on him. And this will kind of turn into the where we were wrong spot. Outside of Kobe Hudson, he's kind of the number 2 receiver as far as like availability and reliability was Randy Pittman so far.
Oh yeah, no, I agree, and then of course with Xavier Townsend, choosing to transfer earlier in the season, who probably would have been the number 2 guy. But yeah, I would agree that Pittman, he's surprisingly and not surprising at the same time, because we knew last year that he was gonna develop and probably become more involved in the offense, as his career at UCF progresses. But Randy Pittman definitely, he's an exciting player to watch, and the fact that I believe he's only a sophomore.
Yeah.
I believe mistaken. So assuming he wants to stay at UCF, he's going to have at least 2 more years at UCF, and I think that he can be a really good player and potentially a fan favorite like Alec Holler became, because he was there for such a long time.
Yeah, that's always, when you think tight ends, we've had a handful of really productive ones, and a lot of them become fan favorites. And Alec Holler, I think, is at the top of that list for one, his productivity, his longevity, and the fact that he was a fan his whole life. We don't hear those stories as much as maybe the college football that we watched growing up of kids, either growing up in the area or close enough that they go to games. They dream of, wearing a particular uniform in college, and they get to do that. So, I don't know that that's necessarily Randy Pittman's story, but it's something that he could, become a UCF legend from that tight end position. So we can pat ourselves on the back for those choices there. Those are the things we did get correct. But that might be where it ends here. And really, I only had so many in the where we were wrong, but they're big ones. So I think it's kind of going to even out. And this kind of plays, from the Pittman thing. we started in our preseason preview show that, we knew Kobe Hudson's the number one receiver. We assumed Xavier Townsend was going to be the number two, but who is going to emerge as that third receiving threat? And with Xavier Townsend transferring, we never even had a true number two receiving threat. So no real second option in the receiving game has emerged 7 games into the season, and I don't have to tell you that that's a problem.
Yeah, no, and then I admit that I was a little disappointed to see that, we're kind of at the point where obviously we're just not a very strong passing team, and maybe we can touch on that a little bit more later. And but if you look at the targets of certain players like, Whitmore and Magwood, other players I thought like, hey, they could be the solid 2 or 3, surprisingly, targets, receiving wise. They don't get a whole lot of targets. They don't have very many receiving yards. And so I feel like we've had some good depth, but we haven't really had someone that's really stepped up and has been that true number two, much less a 3 target. Because obviously you'd like to think that you have 3 very reliable receivers, and not saying that 2 and 3 aren't reliable, but no one really stands out beyond Kobe Hudson and Pittman.
Yeah, and the only one kind of later, I'd say post transfer that has come on a bit was Javaris Johnson, but he is a senior. But he's had 8 catches in the past like 4 games, so he's the one that's kind of emerging. We assumed to be Magwood. He's only had 1 catch on the season so far. Jared Baker, he's on the field more, but it hasn't resulted in more catches for him at this point. So yeah, that is. And then Jacoby Jones, kind of the same thing. He's definitely been on the field a bit more, but it hasn't resulted in like actual productivity. But it's still valuable to be on the field to read defenses, to make blocks for some of those younger guys. So you kind of hit the nail on the head. No matter how you splice it, just we are very limited in the passing attack, and that kind of stems from the quarterback position, which is where we go next. And we had a quick little chat before we even hit record here. We're not the kind of people that like to bury, our team, our school. I don't really like to do it with other teams' players because these guys are doing things that we could only dream of doing. So I like to keep that perspective, even when I do this show. But I don't think it's unrealistic to say that the expectations we did have for KJ Jefferson simply were not met this year. And while I guess it's not impossible that he finds himself on the field again by the end of the year, through 7 games, 2 of which he did not play. It's a swing and a miss in the NIL quarterback market as far as KJ goes. Ja'Cory Brown remains to be seen. We'll talk about him more later. But KJ definitely not what we were hoping for this year.
Yeah, KJ Jefferson. First off, I think that he has a very unique skill set that can probably be applied to very certain offenses. Unfortunately, the vision that Gus Malzahn had for him didn't pan out. And again, we came to the point in the season where he had to make that tough decision and say, hey. KJ Jefferson, it's time for someone else to step up to the reins of the quarterback position and start, and hopefully the team would improve from there. But again, he had some fun moments, especially in that TCU comeback game. I was there person to witness that, and I'm very thankful I was there to see that. He had some very awesome moments in that, and but the only thing is that if you're not going to be consistent enough to help your team win, then unfortunately you're probably going to find yourself not playing every day.
Yeah, let's stick with the positives here for a minute because I did forget that you were at the TCU game. Give us a minute or two on just the experience of being at TCU, that stadium. Obviously, the game is an all timer. I'm calling it the reverse Baylor from 2023, right? So, but obviously that amazing comeback is one thing. But what was the experience like at TCU?
Well, first of all, it was just as good as advertised. I've heard other people talk about it, and other Big 12 fans that I'm friends with that have had the opportunity of attending a game there, and they just say it's a great game day atmosphere. And their fans, they were great. They were actually amongst the nicest fans that I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot of UCF away games, and I will say that they were the nicest, most accommodating fans that I've ever come across.
Wow.
But no, and then just as the game was going on, you can kind of tell that their fans started getting a little like concerned, especially in that late third quarter, early fourth quarter, and they definitely were loud and proud, and but of course you can kind of tell towards the end that they just lost the oxygen once we got that big touchdown towards the end there, and but just a great experience. Definitely, the game day atmosphere is just as good, if not better, as advertised.
And I think it's important to note in that game and what fueled that comeback is the ability to not give up on running the ball in that situation. Like, we don't come back in that game if KJ's forced to throw it 29, 36 times. Like, that's just not how that game was going to come back. And you saw a little bit of that even with Jakari Brown in this, Iowa State game that we could have easily won there at the end. Granted, the offense, we had 2 pick sixes essentially, so that boosted the score a little bit. That kept us in the game. But the offense, while the passing numbers aren't great, of course, you could see a bit difference there. But that's what I would combine to, like, the ability to stick with the run. That's your bread and butter. We already talked about how good these running backs are. So, like, even with KJ, and if KJ does not see the field again, he will always have that moment at UCF to come back and beat TCU the way they did. So that's something to be proud of, at least. And I think it is important, if you remember, KJ, while he was highly touted, it does say something about the staff and the school that, like, just because they paid him the money, it wasn't like, we paid for him, we're going to leave him out there all year, whether he wins or loses, because there's other schools that would do that, and we have seen that before. And I think it's also important to mention KJ was basically the second choice of Malzahn. For those that remember the offseason, the first quarterback that was potentially going to be brought in was Coastal Carolina's Grayson McCall. And he ended up last minute switching to NC State. And his season has not gone much better than KJ's. He got hurt. He played in 3 games, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, 500 yards passing. So, ironically enough, regardless of which NIL quarterback we would have went with, we'd be in a very similar boat. So you can't even say what if about Grayson, because he's, unfortunately for him, suffered a very similar fate with the Wolfpack.
Yeah, no, and I'm gonna always remember KJ for that comeback against TCU. That's the first thing that's gonna come to mind with KJ Jefferson. I'm not gonna think about, how ultimately he, didn't become the starting quarterback moving forward. But yeah, I'm gonna always just have that fond memory. Like, yeah, he led that 21-point comeback against TCU, but yeah, it seems like this has been a very interesting year for transfer quarterbacks, especially, up at FSU and then NC State, as you're talking about. And obviously, there's been one serious lottery ticket winner, and that is Miami with Cam Ward, who,
Right.
yeah, I saw some graphic earlier. I think it was ESPN who put it out. They compared him to the last 4 Heisman winners. They were all quarterbacks, and statistically, he at this point in the season, he has more like touchdown passes and then like comparable passing yards as like a couple of them at this point in the season. So, and that was just an absolute home run transfer for Miami. But yeah, it's been an interesting year when it comes to transfer quarterbacks. And like you were saying, just because the schools or the NILs, I should say, are paying the quarterbacks doesn't mean that they're going to stay out there the whole season, because ultimately the coaches want to win. The fans want to win, and the people who funnel the money into the collectives, they want to win. And if they come to a point where in the season they don't think the quarterback is going to get it done, then the coach is probably going to make a change at that point.
Yeah, and for every KJ and Grayson, you have, a Cam Ward, you have a Joe Burrow type that, like, was a solid player at his previous schools, and then he gets plugged into what's statistically the greatest college offense to this point in history. So you never quite know how it's going to work out. I listen to, like, Mark Daniels' show every morning on the radio, and he's with Mike Bianchi, and love Mike Bianchi or hate him, but every once in a while he'll give you a gem. And one that he said recently is, like, you get talent in the transfer portal, you don't always get leadership. And I'm not necessarily saying that KJ was a bad leader, but it is hard to immediately plug into a new place and become that leader, even if you're that type of person, And I'm not saying that is what it did or didn't happen. Obviously, RJ Harvey was going to be, we talked about this too in the preview, that, like, as long as he's able to play his role well enough, RJ Harvey is going to be the captain. He might be a captain, but RJ is going to be the captain. And I still believe that's the case. But it is hard to, like, it's just the nature of the position. You're viewed as a leader, even if you don't have the C on your chest. Some schools don't even do the C on the chest. So it's, as a quarterback, I think it's particularly hard that, like, whether you're that mentality or not, like, you have to be a leader, especially when you go to a new place.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think that just it's just one of the probably the cons of the transfer portal is that it's probably going to be more difficult to plug in into new teams and a new change of scenery, and obviously there's some programs that have done very well with it, but I think for the most part, if you look at most programs, they're probably going to have a mixed reviews, so to speak, with the results that they get from their transfer, especially at quarterback, because obviously that's a very key position, and it takes a while to develop camaraderie with the wide receivers and cohesiveness and just get a good flow of everything. But yeah, Cam Ward though he's one of those few exceptions where he's just come in and right away has made Miami the best that they have been in recent memory. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a Miami fan, like, we definitely expected them to be better, to give more to their expectations than they have in the past decade or so. It's important to tell the whole story that two very very close games for Miami that could have gone the other way. One is still, I don't know how it ended with that Virginia Tech game. Like, I did not expect that to end, be anywhere close to that crazy of a game. Um, if Miami's 4-2, and one loss in the ACC, their whole future could still be ahead of them. They could still win the conference, still make the college football playoff. It wouldn't change much of their destiny if those two games don't go the wrong way. But the perception is different. And what's funny is, like, Cam could have the same stats, but he, would be viewed slightly different. But at the moment, they are the team to beat. In some years, there's arguments on who the best team in Florida is, and at the moment, there's no way that anybody else can say anything unless you're a Hurricane.
yeah, no, I agree. I think Miami is running away with it right now, and they probably will for the whole year. And I'll give them respect where it's due.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't, nothing more you can do but that. You mentioned the transfer portal, and you live by it, you die by it. Sometimes, we did have that. It's the new thing now. Week 5, maybe week 6, you get those mass exodus from certain schools, and UCF was hit with could have been bigger. I've seen schools with bigger exodus than this, but it ended up being 6 total players that I'm aware of. We mentioned Xavier Townsend, fan favorite, kicker Colton Boomer. That one, I wouldn't mind pausing on that one for a minute. It appears that he was going to be injured for a bulk of the year anyway, and with the current kicker in place was like the number 3 kicker in the country coming in. So, like, I don't know if that one happens if he doesn't get hurt. We'll never know the full story. Maybe there's a podcast 5 years from now, but that one I put more with an injury. I would say. And then Byron Threats, who was only here for about a month before he decided, and that one was Lee Hunter kind of called him out, and I'll trust Lee Hunter to give me an opinion of some players. And some people have said, hey, you can only take that with a grain of salt because Lee Hunter is also a transfer. But I look at him as, yes, he was a transfer, but he was a Gus Malzahn guy. Like, if Gus doesn't get fired from Auburn, Lee Hunter's still at Auburn. If Gus goes to Arkansas next year, Lee Hunter's probably going to Arkansas. So I can't fault the guy for committing to a coach, because some of these guys do. They tell you commit to a school, don't commit to a coach. Sometimes they do commit to a coach. So, yes, I get the irony that he himself is a transfer, but I think it's very obvious to see where his allegiance lie. So there's that. Defensive end Kevin McCall, and he's made some noise on social media with some allegations that I'm not going to say aren't true, because there's truth to both sides of the story. There obviously could be more to it. But I will say, if that is in fact the story, we need to clean some stuff up internally, whether it just be communication, the proper, which almost any company in the world, you could say that you got to clean that stuff up. William Wells, the safety, and then offensive line, Wes Dorsey. Only 2 starters, if you count, Colton Boomer, but he would have been hurt anyway. So it was more some depth players, but, like, you can tell the difference. You lose 6 players that at least 5 of those you knew by name going into the year. It makes you wonder what's going on with your program.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think it's just gonna be. I'm gonna put a little bit more weight into the fact that this is just the new age of college football. If you're not getting the opportunity to see the field, then there's players that are just more than likely going to feel like, hey, I'm just gonna hit the portal and take my luck in the portal and try to find another opportunity. Colton Boomer, fan favorite. I sincerely wish him the best of luck. I do
As
believe
well. Yep.
that a new approach, I shouldn't say a new approach because I've seen this before. We've seen this before, and Dylan Gabriel actually is where, they get hurt. They're hurt for the majority of the remainder part of the season, and then they just feel inclined that, hey, maybe, let me take a red shirt this year. I haven't taken one yet, and let me hit the portal and see what opportunities that I got. And I think that some of it might be partly due to because they probably feel like it's possible that someone has taken their job in their absence. And then they have to kind of earn it back, and as opposed to just maybe, hey, let me just hit the portal. Maybe I'll find a new change of scenery and have an opportunity to play. So Colton Boomer, I wish him the best of luck. I have a feeling he's going to end up somewhere, and he's going to be a starting kicker for a program this time next year.
I agree. I'd be very surprised unless his injury prevents him from like competing in a camp wherever he ends up. That would be the only thing I would think that would stop him from that sort of opportunity. Um, I do think the most surprising one for this is Xavier Townsend, because this is a guy not injured, not buried on the depth chart, while the passing game is stagnant, was making waves as a returner, right? So this is a guy that was getting his touches and was going to have an opportunity. If you're good, you're going to have the chance to show it. And I don't wish this fate on him, but I couldn't help but think back, and you'll remember this. It was the COVID year. If you remember Jalen Robinson, everyone nicknamed him the Flash. Tall dude, dreads, just a fan favorite. Transferred in from Oklahoma in 2020 COVID year, just under 1,000 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. Going into 2021, got hurt, transferred out to Ole Miss, and that when he went there that whole year, he had 5 catches for 29 yards. He did end up at TCU for his 5th year, had 400 yards, had a touchdown, made it a little better. But I bring his story up to say that, and a lot of people, especially the old timers, bring this up about the transfer portals. That the grass is not always greener. The grass is often greener where you water it. So, and I'm not saying that he can't succeed other places, but you do have to be careful. And we see plenty of examples of guys that portal button trigger finger is just a little too quick. And I think if you talk to some of them, they may say, you know what, I didn't have it nearly as bad as I thought at where it was. I think that is the case. That can be the case for some of these guys. Some of these guys could say leaving UCF is the greatest decision I ever made. Like, it can go either way, but I do think you hear more stories that went the way of like a Jalen Robinson than you do the other way around.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I wish Xavier Townsend much luck because I'm sure he's very talented. We know he is. I do have a feeling he will find an opportunity, but of course, will he get the opportunity to get plenty of targets or touches? That will be something that we'll just have to check in this time next year and see wherever he ends up if it did pan out for him or not. But I know that I think one of the reasons why he probably didn't want to stay, if I recall correctly, when he hit the portal, he only had like 14 targets through those 3 or 4 games or whatever.
Right.
Which you can, kind of look at it as you will. He probably thought he was going to get more opportunities to like at least be targeted, or just, he was just going to have a bigger role in the offense at that point in the season.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought that before potentially taking the field that 5th time and wasting that red shirt, he would just hit the portal and just gamble. And maybe, like you were saying, some of these players get a little bit more, transfer portal trigger friendly. They do it too fast. Maybe that will be the case with him, but he probably also might have had programs, and of course only unofficially,
Sure.
programs potentially unofficially in his ear about, hey, we can maybe work out some sort of NIL. We think that you could play for us, start for us, get more touches, whatever. And I think we'd be naive to think that stuff like that doesn't happen. Not saying that it happened here, but it's also a possibility of why he was inclined to hit the portal as early as he did in the season.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I will a slight defense of maybe the coaching in the system is when it appeared that the passing offense wasn't going to be what it was. He actually ended this year with he had 10 catches but 12 carries. So there was an active attempt to get him some end around, some jet sweeps. So I will at least say that at least where I was sitting in the stands, we actively tried to get him the ball. And like, I don't know if that was just to get him to stay or this guy's electric, let's get him the ball. So you can at least say, you can't say they didn't try their best in that scenario. So I'll give him credit for that. But everything you said makes perfect sense. And you can pretend it doesn't happen with other schools and like there are schools that go as far as like, we'll pay you X amount to just take your red shirt, and then we'll talk when we can actually talk to you, and hopefully you pick us. But and oftentimes they pick other schools too. Not saying that's what's happening with him, but that's how crazy it is with these transfer portals nowadays. So let's talk. The season as it broke down. We're 3-0 after the TCU loss. We kind of TCU win, the comeback win. The Colorado game is really where the changing of the guard happened, and I wish I could have kept this tweet that I saw from somebody. It was one of the people in the the Space Knights, the UCF Twitter Mafia, if we're still using that term. I guess X Mafia doesn't sound as cool, but leading up to that game, somebody just put like, "Hey," because there was the quote from Dion like, "How are you going to stop UCF?" Said, "We're going to load the box and pray," and which made us feel good. Like, yeah, no, that's how good we are. You have to pray to try and stop us. And somebody was out there just like, "Hey, what if they just stick Travis Hunter on Kobe Hudson the whole time and then load the box?" And I'm like, shit, that's probably like, that's how you beat it. Like, not everybody has a Travis Hunter, so that wasn't going to be a blueprint for everybody. But I remember thinking, like, shit, man, that's all it's going to take with the and while that game I will say is slightly closer than the score indicated, it's no doubt that Colorado was the better team that day. And moving past them to the Florida game, I will go as far as to say, if we got Jakari Brown into the offense a little bit sooner, I'm not saying it's a guarantee to beat Florida, but that game is a nail biter on both sides at that point. I think that may have been the time to make the change. Obviously, hindsight's 50-50, as Cam Newton used to say, or 2020, I guess he'd say. But I think we are in the right position now, which while Jakari Brown, not perfect, only 62 yards passing against Iowa State, really electric with his legs to aid that running attack. I'm at the point now, Jakari Brown now, EJ Colson later, because it's very important to note EJ Colson graduated early. He should be playing his senior year of high school as we record this. So while he'll keep his red shirt, he's only played in I think 2 games, maybe 3. So to me, at least for this year, moving into next year, I think it's Jakari Brown now, EJ Colson. Let's worry about NIL quarterbacks maybe down the line, but let's actually develop one for a change, which we haven't done in some time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that if we had Ja'Cory Brown, starting the Florida game, not saying we would have won, but I think that it would have definitely been a closer, more competitive game. Just because I feel like he was a little bit more versatile of a quarterback than it would have given Florida a little bit more of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Bottling him up because obviously he's a little bit more faster and a little bit more accurate of a passer, in my opinion, as well. Even though the Iowa State game, it might not seem like it. But I do like the idea of Ja'Cory Brown, being developed into the starter in long term, and hopefully he chooses to stay. Obviously, in this day and age with the transfer portal, and nothing's guaranteed. But with what I believe is 2 years of eligibility, Ja'Cory Brown, I believe, if he wanted to stay and felt like he could really shine at UCF, honestly, I feel like he could be something very special if we just give him the opportunity. And then, of course, insert Ja'Cory Brown for the last 5 games of the season. Well, technically the last 6, 7 games, but last 5 games of the season, I expect that our offense to be at least modestly more improved. Just because I think that the passing game is going to be at least a little bit more improved than on a passing standpoint.
I agree, and you mentioned with any player now, it's kind of it gets frustrating. There's in plain English that like, hey, this guy's coming along. I hope he stays. Like that is you have to say that about almost everybody now. And the red shirt thing is getting out of hand. Like we're finally out of COVID years, so that was just another confusing sprinkles on top of this cake when guys had the extra year because of COVID, right? Pretty sure anyone that has a COVID year has past college football at this point, except for that one guy at Miami that's in like his 9th year, that one tight end. But aside from that guy, what do you think? And this isn't my idea originally, but I'm adopting it. I think in the future, you get rid of red shirts, you get rid of the concept. When you play college football, you get 5 years total. That's just what you get. That's it. Medical red shirts you can talk about on a case-by-case basis, but I think it would just be cleaner if from the day you step on campus as a freshman till you graduate and you can be the grad 5th year. I just think that'd be so much cleaner for the way rosters are constructed.
I agree, and I too actually. I know you mentioned earlier that you listen to 96.9 The Game. I listen to it probably a couple days out of the week when I'm on the road in the world's largest parking lot known as Interstate 4. Um, and listen to that Mark Daniels. And Mark Daniels had a very similar take. He's like saying, "Hey, you know what? Just start them 5 years from the second that they get on campus, and then if there's a season-ending injury and it happens early enough in the season, maybe you can give them some sort of medical red shirt and you give them one." But I agree. I think that if we can get to a point where it's just, hey, everybody gets 5 years. No special exceptions other than maybe just again a case by case with injuries, that would be ideal world. And then you don't have 27-year-olds in college because they took like 3 or 4 red shirts for whatever reason.
Right. I think and like it's easy to say something is simple, but I think you get 5 years, you get one transfer.
Yeah.
Any transfer outside of that, we're going back to the '90s where you have to sit out a year. I think it's that. Like it's easy to say it's that simple, but like that would just clean up a lot, and things will get through the cracks, and there'll be exceptions, but like it'll at least give a structure that we currently don't have.
Yeah, I agree, and I do like that transfer rule as well. And if they want to transfer a second time, there has to be some sort of penalty. I mean, I shouldn't say penalty, but just something that kind of makes it to where they'll think twice about doing a second transfer, being going to 3 schools within a span of 4 or 5 years. Because obviously, I think that takes away from their college experience as well. And I know sometimes people might not, think about that, but I think that college is a very formidable time in people's lives where you develop relationships, you obviously pursue an education. And I think that if you transfer as much as some of these players do, it takes away from that. And then I think it takes away an opportunity that they unfortunately probably won't get again at some point in their lives. So I think that to a degree, it also protects the players as individuals and not so much just of them as players with maybe the goal of trying to play at the next level and thinking that they need to transfer just to get that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, really becoming the college football fan I am now, before I like knew college was in the cards for me and what like I became a UCF fan as I was graduating high school, knowing that's the college I wanted to go to. But going through high school, I'm an Eagles fan. I still like Penn State a bit. That was first college football game I ever went to was Penn State LSU bowl game. So I was following Penn State, the not death penalty, but damn near close. All the sanctions that got hit with them after the Sandusky stuff. That's really the first time I learned about like transferring because you didn't see a lot of it even as early back as like the mid 2000s. And you'll learn that like, okay, yeah, you transfer, you have to sit out. And, that happens so that people don't just get in an argument at practice and transfer every day. And that always made sense to me. I'm like, at least it's almost like, and again, I'm not a political person, but the whole concept of like when you buy a gun, there's that cooling off period to me that the threat of needing to sit out is almost like the cooling off period before you jump the shark. So that's how I always viewed it. And I don't remember who the first like big transfer I remember UCF getting, but it was one of those, that they sat out the year and then they played. And it was just like that whole, we have I even think of, was it,
Well,
it wasn't Jim.
Storm
That,
John,
that's
like,
it. Yes.
yeah, because he played at Miami. He had like 2 rushes for like 100 yards and a touchdown or something like that. It was a ridiculous stat line because he had like
Yeah.
one. And he transferred. He had a city year, but
Mhm.
the year that he was eligible was the perfect year. Well, almost the perfect year where we went to the Fiesta Bowl and we lost that one game. But he sat a full year. So
Yeah, no, that's I couldn't think of the person. I was right around that time, that era, but yeah. So it's that whole, we had this guy that was, at the time Miami was viewed as, like for someone that was good enough to go to Miami and to now come here was viewed that way. So that's a perfect example. And now it's just it's a bit different. And then you've heard of guys that like what was the running back from our perfect season that got hurt, ward number 1. I'm drawing a blank here.
Hamilton, Javon Hamilton.
Juwan Hamilton, yeah. So he got hurt, and then he kind of transferred down because there was like this unwritten rule that if you transferred down to like he went to FCS, you went to JMU, you didn't have to sit out. And then he transferred back up to Eastern Michigan. So like those always made sense to me. Maybe it's just because it's the world I grew up in, but it's like, yeah, if you're gonna go FBS to FCS or even a HBCU, like clearly you're not doing that just to improve your stock. So they didn't make you make you sit out. So it's like, again, maybe it's just the world I grew up in, and that's why it makes sense to me. But those always made sense. So I think any form of structure, just the semblance of a structure, the 5 years, one transfer, it's simple. You could write that whole structure on one piece of paper. It's like we go from where there's no rules now to like that might as well be concrete bars compared to what we have now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it would be better for college football. Well, just college athletics as a whole, not
Yeah.
just football, athletics as a whole. If a structure like that or along those lines was adopted.
So we've talked about where we've been. Let's talk about where we're going here with 7 games. We have 5 games left. Homecoming is this week. Um, number 11 BYU comes to town, followed by the space game. Blake's already ready for the space game, if you can't tell from what he's wearing today. Versus Arizona, followed by trips to Arizona State, West Virginia. Finish the year on a Friday night versus Utah. We have 3 wins. It's obvious now the goal is to at least get to 6. Do you see a path for that for this team?
I absolutely do, and the reason why I do is because just put it a point blank is a Ja'Cory Brown. I'm not going to say that I'm completely sold on him as like the future quarterback, but I do believe that he gives our team a better chance to win moving forward. I do believe that when he is able to pass, and he has demonstrated that he has the ability to pass, even though that Cincinnati game was very painful to watch. If you look at his stat line, I think he completed 60 or 65% of his passes. He had, I believe it was around 200 passing yards. And I just remember when he would, I know he didn't play the whole game, but when he was right in front of me on the 30-something yard line and he was throwing some passes, he threw in some really tight windows, put the ball exactly where it needed to be. And when I see that, I think like, hey, with some fine tuning and some consistency, that can be a very dangerous quarterback. Um, and so I do believe that with Ja'Cory Brown, we do have a path to go 3-2 the rest of the way. I think that the most obvious wins would be Arizona, and then either Arizona State or West Virginia, and then Utah. BYU, I'm going to be, hopeful that we can pull off a big upset for a homecoming game this weekend. I'm not going to expect it, but I do believe that there is a very realistic path to win 3 of the next 5 games and go to a bowl game.
You know what's absolute madness is even after losing 4 straight, we are 2-point favorites against BYU. Yes, we're at home. Yes, it's homecoming. But this team is 7-0 and 11th in the country. Apparently, there is a weird thing that BYU doesn't play well in day games. Like, that's like a weird bugaboo that they have. So maybe that's part of it. And granted, it's only a 2-point favorite, but like, are they just not watching us, or they're looking at all these close scores and like, oh, they'll figure it out eventually, and like maybe they're viewing this as a trap game for BYU, but like, I don't know what Vegas has going on right now, but like, I appreciate the confidence a little bit, but also like, leave us alone because it just adds to like every time you lose a game you're favored in, not great. But otherwise, I agree. Like BYU, not going to rule that out entirely. Arizona space game. If we win one more game this year, it has to be the space game against Arizona. If we have to keep any semblance of pride, it's staying undefeated in space games. That's my concrete opinion. Arizona State, it's possibility. West Virginia, also a possibility. Utah, with their change in quarterback, unfortunately, that does put that in play. So like, none of these games are unwinnable. I think BYU is probably the hardest game left to win. But I agree, 3-2 is very much, would I be shocked if it's not accomplished? No, but I think we're very similar tracks here on what could happen with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And going back to BYU for a second, I mean, maybe the time change will mess with them because it'll be a 3:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff, and for them that's like what 12:30 or something.
Yeah.
Maybe early in the day for them to play football. I don't know on their internal clocks, but
Do you remember our last year? Not to cut you off. Our last year in the AAC, we played Navy at 11 a.m., which is the earliest game I ever remember playing at home. I thought it was a misprint or like it was showing me mountain time or something. And that was that weird, we lost to Navy when we had, we could have hosted the American Championship game. I remember bringing mimosas to tailgate. Like, I had a great time until the kickoff, but like, I didn't know it was possible to play 11 a.m. on an East Coast, but they let it happen. So maybe that'll throw them off the way it threw us off back then, but who knows?
yeah. I mean, for us, it's an okay time. We've had plenty of 3:30 p.m. kickoffs ever since the American timeline, and of course ESPN, ESPN Plus. They love those types of kickoffs. I'm not sure who's televising it this weekend, but
Right.
who knows? Maybe we'll throw off BYU. Maybe that's a part of Vegas's reasoning for us to be favorited. Maybe, and I've heard this I think it was Mark Daniels actually who touched on this very briefly. That while they are a very good team, there's been some questions about like if they've been like truly like tested just yet.
Mhm.
They have had good opponents, but they haven't had like top tier opponents. And obviously, UCF is not a top tier opponent, but what BYU has done very well, and alluding what Daniels was saying the other day, was that they don't make mistakes. They don't turn the ball over very much. They just play very good football. They don't get penalized very much, and that's the reason why they're undefeated. And you have to give them respect for that. So if we were to pull off an upset against BYU, obviously that would be a huge thing for our season. It would get us back to 500, and it would kind of have a similar feel to that Oklahoma State game that we had last year, even if it's not a blowout like that was.
Yeah, I mean the premise is set. I remember back in 2014, a Justin Holman led UCF team beating BYU in overtime. So who knows? Maybe something like that could happen again. So
Yeah, absolutely.
one of the last things I want to touch on, obviously, there's been a lot of flack when a team loses four straight. It's hard to not that I want to end on a negative note, but I think it deserves to be talked about. The Twitter mafia has been out for Gus for the way things are going. I'm no matter what team it is. I've said this to Gator fans. I've said this to Florida State fans who are having just as bad a year as we are, if not worse. Um, Whenever people are like, "Oh, this guy's got to go," my immediate response is, "All right, you want him fired? Then who do you want them to hire?" Because it's easy to say get rid of this guy, but if you don't have a true like realistic option, like the Gator fans, right? That everyone says get rid of him and hire Lane Kiffin. Well, Lane Kiffin's on like a top 10, 12 team in the SEC. He's not going to leave what he's built, in my opinion, to go to Florida. I just don't think it's possible. So I don't see that as a realistic option. So my question for you, and I want to have a little fun with it. Let's say Gus doesn't get fired. Let's say Gus retires. Let's not be overly negative. He just says, you know what? This modern game has caught up with me. I'm gonna, be a assistant AD and just help with other things, and I'm gonna ride off into the sunset. No more Gus. Is there a realistic coaching option that you would want to keep your eye on? Because I actually do have one in my mind, but I'm curious if you have one.
So I, off the top of my head, I don't really have any names, but I can tell you what kind of coach I would like.
Okay, I'll take that.
I'm a really a huge fan of, and not to kind of allude to, kind of how we went after Josh Heupel and Scott Frost, but I really do like offensive coordinators that are just really killing it at their place where they've been there for at least a few years and just, want an opportunity to step up and be a CEO of their own program finally. So I really would like to see more of an up and comer as opposed to maybe a coach that maybe just, had that big job and was just let go or step aside or whatever. And then so I really like the idea of a younger up and comer type of coach, but no one off the top of my head comes to mind except maybe the head coach at Liberty. I know that he brought Coastal Carolina to a really good national prominence. I didn't really know too much about Coastal Carolina until he had that great run with Coastal, and then Liberty hired him away. Um, and I admit that off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank to his name, but he,
Jamie Chadwell.
yep, Jamie Chadwell, that's it.
Mhm.
He is proven to be a phenomenal recruiter, a great program builder. He does a lot with very little, so to speak. Not saying that Liberty or Coastal have very little, but I feel like he's maximized both of those programs in every way you possibly can. And I think a guy like that, he's also relatively young as well, would be a great fit for UCF.
Yeah, like I said, Coastal. When I think Coastal, I think their baseball program that went on that run and won a College World Series. So yeah, it wasn't until 3-4 years ago that their football team was even in the conversation. So they know what it's like you said, to do more with less. Liberty, though, I think people be surprised how much money is actually getting pumped into that school from just the different political figures and such that are associated with it. But I agree with the concept. We tried the established veteran. Maybe we need to go back to a Heupel Frost-esque. Anyone that says bring Scott Frost back, like, I'm kicking off the podcast. We're not having that discussion. I'm not having that discussion. Just not doing it. I don't have it in my heart to have that discussion. But the person that I will bring up is someone who would also be returning to UCF, and that is Texas State's current head coach, G.J. Kinney, who I think has a wide open offense, would bring us back to an era where we were lighting up the scoreboard, knows the school well enough. Every once in a while, too, he throws out a random tweet about, like, just his time here, or how he's praising a player that's even still here or was here. Like, he's weirdly connected a link with, like, UCF still, and, like, Texas State, while he's done well with them, that's not a place you can't remove him from. I think, it's definitely, it's, to me, it's in the cards. Like, if for some reason Terry Mahadra's calling me up, first I'm going to say, Terry, how'd you get this number? And then second, I'm going to say, if you're asking me to pick it, Terry, I'm going with Kenny. That would be my choice if we had to pick somebody this year.
Honestly, I love that. And not to mention, I know that he was a very good recruiter for us. He also has great connections with Texas. And, not saying that we, because we obviously have a great recruiting base here in Central Florida. But if you have some pipelines into Texas as well, it doesn't hurt. So I agree that he would be a phenomenal hire. And honestly, I didn't even think about it. So I think it would be just a brilliant, if for whatever reason Gus was no longer the head coach at UCF, he should certainly be at the top of the list unless he, some other big job comes after him first.
Yeah, I mean, for him to, when he left UCF and went to
Incarnate Word.
Incarnate Ward. I knew Ward was the last, but, like, that, talk about never hearing of something before and making something out of nothing. That, I thought that was I don't know what that was. I thought it was like an IMG Academy type situation. I didn't know it was a true, college, but yeah, to go from there and then jump to what is a D1 program, to me is very impressive. Before we get out of here, last bit of I think this is something that needs to be weighed in on. That was a fun exercise, though. I enjoyed that. Where are you in the gold debate for UCF? Are you one of the people that want gold jerseys? Are you where do you? I'll let you give your opinion first. Where, because the worse things get, the more the gold conversation comes up. We finally had gold helmets this week, which calmed a few people down. But yeah, where do you, as we get out of here, what's your opinion on that?
Truthfully, I mean, we are the black and gold. So I have kind of mixed feelings about it because I feel like the gold jerseys, they can either be phenomenal or they just turn out horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But it really just depends on how it's designed, what kind of colors are you incorporating, what kind of number fonts are you? Because I feel like all it takes is like the wrong tint of gold or the wrong number font, and then it just doesn't look good at all.
Yeah.
So I'm open minded to gold jerseys. I do like what we have. Gold uniforms as a whole. I love the gold helmets. At the very least, we can embrace like black uniforms with gold helmets, and I think
Definitely.
that's actually my favorite combo is when we go all black but with a gold helmet. I can't wait to see night mode again. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping that we'll see it at some point this season. Maybe it'll be the Black Friday game against Utah. Who knows? Um,
Yeah,
but
that would make sense to do it for that. I have a very similar opinion. So one of my good friends, Luke, who I believe you've met at games before with me, he says the same thing. Say, hey man, we're black and gold. We got to wear more gold. And while I don't disagree, a lot of people share the opinion of you saying, like, when it's done great, it looks great, but when it's done terribly, it's done bad. Like, this little banner on the bottom of our screen here that says the state of UCF football, it was hard to find the right shade of gold to even put that up. Like, gold is tricky. So my question, open endedly, is like, give me an example of a gold jersey done well. And I think it's very hard to find. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's very hard to find. So for me, I think you crushed it with the gold helmets, wear the gold helmets more. And I think we need to orchestrate the gold pants back into it more. Like, I think of, like, and maybe it's rose tinted glasses because it's when I got involved, but like the Jeff Godfrey era was like white helmet, black jersey, gold pants. And that I think should be worn more. So, like, I'm all for gold, but until you can show me what a good gold jersey looks like, just give me more helmets and pants that are gold.
yeah, no, I kind of have that same mindset. And I actually had our last couple years in COSA. I actually really liked that uniform set.
Yeah.
Truth, I think it was when we transitioned out of Adidas into Nike, and then the jerseys changed at least a little bit. So yeah, I mean, a white helmet, black jersey, gold pants. I wouldn't mind seeing that combo either, or gold, black, gold out, and maybe that'll be kind of interesting to see too.
Mhm.
Gold jersey. I mean, so I know what I wasn't a fan of, and that was the gold jerseys during the last couple years of the George O'Leary era.
Yes,
I mean, I do have one of those jerseys,
as do I. Yep.
a jersey, a game used jersey, but you know, I have mixed feelings about seeing that type of gold on our players again because I think that it just is the best representation of the black and gold for us.
Yeah, I have the Traquan Smith freshman year. The year we went 0-12, he won freshman of the year. And he wore 80 that year until he changed up. So I have his freshman gold jersey from that era.
Oh, cool.
But back then, with O'Leary, I always said when we got that new uniform palette, like we were trying to be Penn State of the South. That's what I thought George O'Leary wanted the look to, and I understood the vision too. And I always thought it was neat. Unofficially, we wore gold jerseys for day games, white on the road, and black jerseys for night games. And they never came out and said that. But if you line up the start times with the jerseys, that's basically what we did for about 2-3 years. So that was something I could get behind. So not to hammer this home too much, what is your favorite gold jersey that we've worn, if such exists?
Oof. So it's not a gold jersey per se, but I really, and I know some people might like disagree with me, but I really actually dig that the light mode. I know we only wore it one
I
time,
agree. Yeah.
and I know it's a white jersey, but with gold, fluorescent gold numbers. And during a day game, it's probably kind of hard to see the numbers that they'll
Yeah.
it's just right. But I really like that just because I feel like it's different, it's clean, it's unique, and clearly I think that there's some players that would really dig those types of uniforms as well. Heck, I mean, if I can get my hands on a light mode, a game used jersey, I would jump on that in a second.
That would be great. I think I thought the same thing when I saw them. I'm like, they look cool in photos. I thought they were going to be a nightmare on the field. No pun intended, but they were a little easier to see on TV. I haven't seen them in person, but on TV they were a little easier to see than I expected them to be. We should do maybe if we make a bowl game, or maybe even if we don't, we need something else to talk about. We should just go through our jersey collections on an episode. I think that would be awesome. Just something to throw out there. But if I had to pick a true gold jersey, gun to my head, that was good, I'm probably going with like the Kyle Israel, Kevin Smith era. That's the closest thing to. I have a Kyle Israel one. That was Adidas still back then, but like that was white jersey, gold pants, white helmet. White, gold, white, and I don't know if I had to pick one. I think I'm going with that.
Yeah, no, actually, I remember that combo very well, and you know what? I like that. Now that you bring that to mind, and I'm just visualizing and remembering how that looked, I think that was a nice look, and maybe there's a way we can kind of duplicate that, but in a
Mhm.
more modern look. Like for example, maybe more modern looking numbers and just a overall aesthetic jersey design. Yeah, that
Yeah, I
would.
mean, some of these guys on Twitter, I wish I could give some shout outs to. Some of the costume mock-ups they make are incredible, and I people always hint at like a modern take on like the Culpepper era, and that is something I would absolutely love to see if we need something maybe for like a homecoming uniform or something, which would be pretty cool. But I can talk uniforms all day, but I really appreciate and respect Blake's time. So I appreciate you being out here, man. Hopefully brighter days are ahead of us, and hopefully in a month or so I have you back on and we're celebrating going bowling again. So fingers crossed for that.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me on again.
Thanks everyone for listening. Enjoy college football this week. I got power back. I got internet. I'm back in again. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me. So thank you all for watching, listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.